welcome to a video on the Planet Zach YouTube channel. That's right, I'm finally talking about Sonic 06. Now let's not mince words. This game is an IOU 1 Sonic game inside an anime game case with a Sonic sticker slapped on the cover. Countless people before me have laid bare all of this game's sins and everything that it has done against the franchise and what it stands for. This is the part where someone might normally say, "Video game bad, angry face out of 10, or they say, "This is not like other reviews of Sonic 06. And it is quite possible that pointing out these cliches is in and of itself a cliche. Regardless, I'm here to give my take on Sonic 06. My overall view of this game is actually quite positive, which might surprise you, and you're probably thinking, oh, you probably played it as a kid. Not so, good internet traveler. The rose-colored nostalgia goggles I've been proudly wearing for most of this retrospective have been taken off, for I did not receive this game until I was 19, at which point it was 10 years old and had a reputation that preceded it. I knew exactly what I was getting into, and I still had a good time. I didn't even play it until I was started on my 20s, so it is time for you to sit back and let the adult opinion monster roar. I do not see a bad game in Sonic 06, or even a bad idea or concept. I just see a lot of potential that was crushed by development hell. In the first section of this, I will go over a brief history of the game because I feel like it's important to get that part of the story, and in case you aren't aware, I want to do my best to explain why the game is how it is. This will then be followed by my personal opinion and list of grievances with the game. And then at the end, I will talk about the Project 06 remake, which is actually where all of the footage is from. I don't have any way to record gameplay of the actual game itself, but I knew that was not much of an excuse when we have this fan recreation readily available online for free. So how do you make a Sonic 06? Apparently the first step was to have a really cool physics engine. This is, I believe, the Havoc physics engine, which ended up being used in later titles, but the developers wanted to do something cool with this physics engine. Mind you, at this point in development, this game was not even a Sonic title, and I don't know how many assets they developed without Sonic IP in mind, but it probably has a lot to do with why the character design and art direction is the way it is. This was never meant to be Sonic. And then it suddenly was, because of, I think, Sonic's anniversary. I think they tried to make it an anniversary title. And basically, this is part of the story. So step 2, surprise, you're making a Sonic game now. That's great. Surely we can do something that is worthy of the mascot of our company and a beloved icon and all that jazz. But oh wait, sneak attack from step 3, which is, oh, this game isn't gonna run on Nintendo's new console, the Wii. And the Wii's, like, pretty popular. We're gonna need to, have a game on there. So what if we just take the development team and send about half of them to work on a Wii title? Surely that won't cause any problems. So great, now part of your team has left to go make what will eventually become Sonic and the Secret Rings, a somewhat equally notorious title. Well, surely nothing else can go wrong. Surely they won't do anything else to, make this any worse. Well, that's where step 4 comes in, which is rush it for a holiday release. Like a cake that you aren't even going to put into the oven, you're just going to serve your customer cake batter. That's how you make a Sonic 06. And, well, can you really blame the developers for what happened? I feel devastated when I hear stories like this, especially when an IP that I enjoy is involved. And, well, this one was not pretty. So that's the why of the game. Let's get into the what. Sonic 06 overall is kind of a mixed bag. You've got 3 campaigns, similar to how the adventure games were run. Each one is from a different character's perspective, starting with Sonic, and then you get to play as Silver and Shadow whenever you encounter them in one of the stories you're playing through. And just like the adventure titles, each character plays a little bit differently, which I know that a lot of people say that this game killed the adventure style of gameplay, but I mean, come on, it was already kind of a dying art when it came out. I mean, did you see Shadow the Hedgehog? That was somewhat adventure-y, but they were clearly straying farther and farther away from that design philosophy. But for what it's worth, I see adventure's influence in this game, and I'm not really that upset about it. A lot of people say this game doesn't control very well, or that the characters move too slow. I think a lot of that was, supposedly addressed in Project 06. I personally never thought they were too slow or that they controlled poorly. I just know that sometimes the game breaks when you try to do stuff, and it's not great, but I don't think that has anything to do with the controls. It's more just things aren't programmed correctly. A major shining example of this is the snowboarding physics. They're ridiculous. And one of the main things is I can never tell if I'm going to be able to make a jump, because the jump works differently in this game than it has in previous games. In previous games, if you wanted to jump off a ramp, you would wait until you were on the ramp, and then when you hit the peak of the ramp, you would do your best to time it and hit the A button as you left the ramp, and then you would jump or do a trick or whatever. In this game, you're supposed to hold the A button down and then release it when you get to the top of the ramp. That's kind of counterintuitive to how that's worked in the past, and it kind of falls flat for me. I can not always make some of the more critical jumps in stages like White Acropolis or Crisis City, at least in Sonic's campaign where the snowboarding happens. Another weird thing about Sonic's campaign is the Mach speed sections. If I'd done this video several years ago, I would have probably just made a whole section where I bashed Mach speed sections. But in all honesty, Mach speed sections can and have been done better, but most of these are honestly not terrible. The hardest one to figure out the path through is the one at the end of Kingdom Valley, but once I saw somebody do it and figured out how I was supposed to get through it, I can get it on my first or second try most times now. And I really like Radical Train, and the Mach speed section at the end of that doesn't really bother me. The one in Wave Ocean can be a bit tricky just because it'll probably be your first time encountering one, but it's not all that bad. The only Mach speed section that I would say is completely broken is the one in Crisis City. There is just too much going on, there's too much coming at you that can stop you from getting through, and it's just a mess. And I think that whole stage is probably the weakest in Sonic's campaign. Another minor flaw I see in the design is they bring back the panel jumping from Sonic Adventure 1, but instead of having a visible panel for you to jump off of, they just tell you jump when you land on a flat surface. And there's one or two times, even in the first stage, where I'm I wouldn't have known to jump there if I hadn't died there and been oh, maybe I should have jumped. It's kind of, there's no visual feedback to say, hey, this is a place where you're meant to jump. They bring the panels back in Sonic Unleashed, and that's good. You jump when you land on one of those panels, and even sometimes there's a specific button you need to press in order to get off the panel, and that's fine. But having no visual indicator that this is a panel jumping surface, I think that was a bit of a mistake. Another negative for Sonic's campaign is just, overall, it's the one with the weakest story. Mostly because it just feels like Sonic and Eggman are playing a game of keep away with Princess Elise, who is in constant need of rescue. I think this is kind of an indication that Sonic's lifestyle does not lend itself well to being with princesses. I mean, I know we had Princess Sally Acorn in the Archie comics, which I never personally read, but I know a lot of people like that character, and I know she was originally from the Sonic Saturday AM cartoon, But if you ever needed an indication that princesses might not be for the Hedgehog, this is one of those. And I think this might have even been intentional, because it's like Mario is the thing that Sonic was created in a response to. It's like he's the antithesis of Mario. What does Mario do? Mario rescues a princess. And if you have a story where Sonic rescues a princess, it's pretty boring. So, you know, that's kind of, you get what you pay for, I guess. Furthermore, the two stages where Sonic carries Elise as he runs to the stage are very surreal, and I'm not sure how I feel about them. Like, it's like a Jane and Tarzan moment, but like, it's weird. And for those who don't really like the fact that Elise is a human, which, don't get me wrong, that's not my favorite aspect of her character in terms of a potential love interest for Sonic, but that isn't that out of the question for Sonic, because the original concept of Sonic had him having a human girlfriend, so it's kind of like, it's not something they haven't considered before. I know it's a cultural difference, I think, but it's just very interesting. I mean, they're both around the same age, they're sentient beings living in this world, and it's very different from ours. It includes animal people and human people, and they got kind of flirty. It ends with this game and is never brought up again, so I think we can just kind of shelve this as maybe not the best idea, but relatively harmless in the long run and not really bearing over the rest of the series as a whole. Shadow's campaign is fine, and I like the story overall. It's really interesting to see his dynamic with Mephiles, and it overall is probably one of the stronger story points of the game. The only real gripe I have with his gameplay, because he doesn't have the Mach Speed sections or anything like that, and I don't think he has any where he's on the snowboard, but the combat is kind of weird. Like, once you homing attack, you're basically stuck doing fists in the air, and like, I don't get why that is. Silver's campaign is also fine. I don't like that he's less powerful in gameplay than he is in the cutscenes. It's kind of like the villain when you face him versus when he's a playable character meme, but instead of the villain, it's one of the game's three protagonists. He's more powerful in the cutscenes than he is when you're playing as him. He has to physically attack enemies before he can use his psychokinesis on them, which, having to get that close to them is really annoying when you've normally got a longer range attack, like with the homing attack when you play as Sonic. I also hate that ball puzzle in Dusty Desert with a burning passion. I got it by a fluke, and I did not feel like I'd accomplished anything. I just felt like I got lucky. That's also the one time that Amy is playable in the game, and she has the power of invisibility for no apparent reason. That's also bizarre. So does Project 06 fix any of these issues? Well, let's look. Here you can see I lose all my momentum on the snowboard and can't get out of this dip. That was kind of annoying. I mean, maybe I just came to a standstill and didn't have enough momentum, but surely there should be some way around this. It's like you have to work with the geometry of the level. And from what I can only assume is the fact that the voice line that tells you how to jump off of a ramp says to hold A and then let go. They kept that as the method of jumping. You can see the first time I went to the big old gap, I fell off, and that wasn't great. Still a higher success rate than in the original game though, so I'll take what I can get. Now, Tails is pretty decent in this game. For some reason, if you watch the footage while I've been talking, I had a really hard time with him in Wave Ocean, but in here, basically once I figured out that there's actually like a ground plane below this searchlight thing, I didn't have any issues with Tails. He flies fine in this area. I don't know what was happening in Wave Ocean, but I can use Tails just fine. I can use his attacks. He's pretty good in this. While I was playing this stage, I did find the blue gemstone, which gives you like a teleportation power of sorts. Like you pull yourself in the direction that you throw it or something like that. I don't know. I think the gems were pretty broken in the original game, or from what I've seen like of gameplay footage. I didn't bother with them in my playthrough, Basically, when I tried to buy one of the upgrades, some kind of tornado move, I couldn't figure out how to execute it, and so I was like, well, I'm not going to buy any more upgrades then if you're not going to tell me how to use this power. So I actually made it through the entire game without getting any upgrades that weren't absolutely necessary. And honestly, if you have an upgrade that has little to no bearing on the success of the player, then you really shouldn't have included it. It's just pointless at that point. And yes, I'm aware of the irony of saying that power-up is useless when I show footage of me dying in a pit that I could easily have crossed using said power-up. But I mean, honestly, I just misjudged how much of a gap that was, and there were other ways to get over it. And once I fell in, I lost the gem, and this area is so maze-like that I couldn't find it. I like most of White Acropolis, but this area is kind of weird to me. Just easier to navigate maybe would have made it better, but anyway, that's just some food for thought. Overall, Sonic was good to play as, and the button mapping in the ChaosX was a little bit better than in the original game. Let's move on to Shadow. Originally, when I sat down to record this footage, I had planned to play the first level of each character's campaign, followed by one problem level that I felt like should have been fixed in this fan recreation. And so for Sonic, that was Wave Ocean was his first stage. Took way longer than I anticipated because I kept flubbing up on Tails section. And then for his problems stage, I chose White Acropolis since that was the most prevalent issue with the snowboard. And not much of an improvement. But anyway, that's why I started White Acropolis with Shadow next, because it's his first stage. The level design in this game is generally pretty solid, but there was this one thing that I ran into when playing as Shadow. In this first section, the way to get out of this section is to find a switch that opens a door that lets you go to the next section of the stage. And this, like, pull-up bar thing takes you up to this ledge. And then a little bit ahead of this ledge is the ledge with the switch on it, but there's not really a good way to get up there from the ledge the pulley takes you up to, and that's kind of annoying. I guess I'll talk about Rouge since she's on screen now. I actually enjoyed playing as her. They made her more like she plays in Sonic Adventure 2 and give her like her kick move that you can use in that game, and I think that's actually good for her. I think that she played really well in Sonic Adventure 2, like, all things considered, and so I think adding more of that into this game would have been beneficial, but they unfortunately did not do that in the official release. She runs through the same area that Tails does in Sonic's version of the stage, and she's pretty good to play as. I didn't really mind playing as her in the original, but I do admit I really like it when she has like her kick moves. Overall, Shadow's combat system is very much improved. I don't get stuck doing like air kicks when I try to homing attack multiple times like you do in the original game. Something that hasn't been changed though is that you can choose your way up to these searchlights and break them with the homing attack. Shadow mentioned something about a missile, but I have no idea what he's talking about. One thing I did notice when playing Sonic and Shadow's versions of this stage back to back that I didn't notice in my initial playthrough, because I normally finish one character's campaign before starting another. That's just kind of how I like to play the multi-campaign games in the series. They both play through the same sections in the same order. Sonic is supposed to be breaking into the base, Shadow is supposed to be breaking in, getting Rouge, and then breaking out. I think the door that Sonic's Gold Ring is directly in front of at the end of this section here is the same door that opens after you finish Shadow's version of this section. I get reusing stage assets and sections and stuff, but like they could have put it in a different order or something, make it a little bit different, but I digress. I actually ended up moving on to Silver's first stage because the play time was running long and Shadow's only flawed stage is Dusty Desert, and it's just challenging. and it's the last stage of the campaign, so that makes sense. Here you can see I'm dying as Silver because I tried to jump onto a car that was meant to be a platform. I don't remember having this much trouble in the original game, but I just could not land some of these platform jumps, which was annoying to say the least. I do think this cheeky reference to the Chow Garden on this street sign is funny. Pretty sure it's in the original game, but just thought I'd show it off. I'd like to tell you how Blaze plays in this remake, but I got to use it for 2 seconds, careened to my death, and then got game over. With the most ominous game over screen, which I definitely do not remember being in the original game. It's really intense. There's ominous music with it too. I'm pretty sure the original game just boots you back to the title screen. I did end up deciding to do Silver's problem stage. I didn't feel like going back into Crisis City, so I did Dusty Desert, which is his problem stage because of the ball puzzle. But I didn't even make it to the ball puzzle because I kept getting game over trying. It wasn't completely fruitless though. I do have some thoughts. First of all, this first room with the pool ball table puzzle, if you fall into one of these things, you die. And there's one right where the ledge for the entrance stops and one right where the ledge on the other side starts. And if you don't know they're there, or even if you do and you just overshoot or undershoot your shot getting into the middle of this room, you die. And that's really annoying. I wish they would have just, made it so that it destroys the pool ball things, but it doesn't make you die. Here you can see I'm using a move that I'm pretty sure Silver does not have in the original game. It's like a shot to stun enemies. It's really good, but it does require a little bit of your psychokinesis gauge. I did get to play as Amy some in this stage. She has a double jump, and she now has some hammer moves to replace her invisibility, which I think is a much needed change. I do not know why they decided that Amy could become invisible. It's never explained, and it never comes up again in future titles. It's so bizarre. So I just whacked enemies with hammers like I was in Sonic Adventure 1, and I'm like, this is good Amy gameplay. Bring more of this. I hope that the Sonic Frontiers playable Amy is half as good as this. It's just, this is just peak Amy performance. While I do think this new move for Silver is more believable as the Silver from the cutscenes and makes him a little bit more manageable to play as, I almost feel like it's a little bit too overpowered. I don't know. I know I'm kind of like wishy-washy on how I feel about the power level that Silver should hold, but I think there should be some kind of middle ground. It is nice that it does take some of your gauge, so you can't just spam it infinitely or anything, but still, I just wish there was a way to play as this character who's already pretty powerful as concept, while not making things too easy, but also still making it feel like authentic to the character's presentation within the cutscenes. I did not unfortunately make it to the ball puzzle like I said, but I did play it a little bit later without filming, and I got to the ball puzzle. It had some much needed improvements. I did fail it because it got into the final area and was like inside a pit, like with a wedge, and I was going to try to use psychokinesis to get it out of the pit, and then I fell through the pit and died. So I think the ball puzzle can be executed better than it was in the original game, but honestly, stuff like that in a Sonic game isn't necessarily my favorite thing. It's not terrible by any means, but the puzzle wasn't that great to begin with. It just seemed like it relied a lot on luck. I know it's kind of a physics-based puzzle, but it's just annoying is what it is. One last thing that didn't really fit anywhere else in the video, but I think in terms of the story of the game overall, it definitely could have maybe used one or two more drafts. The only real main gripe I have is the main villain doesn't really have very clear motivations for his actions, but if you know how it turns out for him, maybe that's okay. Maybe you don't need clear motivations to get what you want in this universe. I do want to say what I think is an explanation for one of the main quote-unquote plot holes of this game. The fact that there's an article written about Elise being killed in the egg carrier crash in the bad future, and yet when Sonic finishes his campaign, he manages to save Elise from that fate. But I think what actually happened is Sonic saved Elise, the egg carrier still crashed, nobody knew that Elise wasn't still on board, and then immediately after that crash, when they're celebrating and walking through the jungle area, Mephiles strikes Sonic and kills him, causing Elise to cry and releasing the flames of disaster. And what a harrowing disaster it was. I will talk more about lore-related stuff in a separate video. That will include things like why Blaze is here, and why Silver goes back to the future and its ruin, things like that. It's all going to be explained the way I know how to explain it. So if you're interested in that, then stick around. But that'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.